Have you ever doubted the existence of God? Have you ever wondered if there is any scientific evidence pointing to the existence of God? Have you come to a point where you began to believe that science and scripture are contradicting each other? If so, I was like you at a point in my life, and I would like to share my story with you. Hi, my name is Emile Goubran. I was born in Cairo, Egypt in 1942 to a Coptic Christian family, and I was raised as a Christian. After high school, I joined the medical school in Alexandria, Egypt, where I lost my faith in the first year at the age of 18 and became an atheist for over 25 years. In 1987, I encountered scientific evidence that I could not ignore, which pointed to the necessity of a higher intelligence behind the existence of life. This evidence was the beginning point of my return back to faith. I would like to start first by stating the reasons why I departed from faith. Number one, I strongly believed that science and scripture contradicted each other. Number two, there was no single evidence that points directly or indirectly to the existence of God. Number three, all scientific evidence at the time seemed to point to and support the idea that life started spontaneously in our natural world through undirected natural processes without the intervention of a higher intelligence or mind behind it. That's to say, there is no creator. How I departed from faith is a process that started when I was young. As soon as I learned how to read, I was fond with reading children's stories. There was no TV or video games or internet at the time, so reading was my only way of entertainment and fun. In junior high, I began reading adventure, fantasy, and science fiction stories. During my 3 years in high school, age 14 to 16, I began to go to our neighboring public library and became interested in reading books in philosophy, sociology, and psychology. All authors in these fields were atheists, so I began to be exposed to their atheist ideology early in my teenage years. Some examples include books for Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir. Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir were French existentialist philosophers of the 20th century who believed that there is no God behind the purpose and meaning of life, but it is the responsibility of the individuals themselves to create the meaning and purpose for their lives. I also read for Karl Marx, and Karl Marx was a 19th century philosopher and a sociologist. He is also known as the father of communism. Marx did not believe in God because he said, if there is a benevolent God, how could he allow pain, suffering, and social injustice? He thought this idea of a divine entity is an invention of the human mind. Therefore, he said, it is man who created God, not God created man. Regarding religion, he said that the religion is an escape gate to the believers from their miserable reality to a supernatural world. Much like some people who indulge in alcohol and in drugs in order to lose consciousness as a way of escaping their painful reality. And that's why he also said that religion is the opium of the peoples. Marx believed that he could find a better way to create the ideal society that embraces social justice, equality, and fair distribution of resources between its citizens by presenting communism as the ideal model. This could be achieved if everyone worked to the best of their abilities to produce wealth, which could then be distributed to everyone according to his needs. I liked this ideology at that time. However, in spite of my exposure to these atheist ideologies, I did not depart from my faith or denied the existence of God. However, what pushed me over the edge was the theory of evolution by Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin is a British biologist of the 19th century. According to Darwin, life originated spontaneously from pre-existing elements in the natural world through undirected natural processes. The newly developed life form has then evolved from simple living organisms to more complex organisms through slow evolutionary steps over a long period of time through the mechanism of natural selection, which ultimately led to the human species as the highest level in the evolutionary process. In summary, living matter originated through chance and time. Intelligent life evolved through the mechanism of natural selection. There is no prior purpose or design. Therefore, there is no intelligent designing mind, that's to say a creator, behind the origin of life. And here comes the theory of Darwinian evolution to present a biological explanation for the origin of life that the atheists needed so badly to refute the necessity of an intelligent being behind the existence of life. As a young, impressionable high school teenager, I became suspicious and doubtful about the origin of life. And a struggle began inside me as to which is true, the Bible account of the origin of life or Darwin's theory of evolution. I graduated from high school at the age of 16 and joined the medical school in Alexandria University in Egypt. The conflict inside me intensified during the years of my medical studies because of frequent reference to evolution by my professors. For example, in our study of the digestive system in anatomy and physiology courses, the professors referred to the appendix as a rudimentary organ that has no function in humans. It simply represents a remnant of the original appendix found in lower animals as evolution progressed towards the human species. Some surgeons used to remove the healthy appendix while doing abdominal operations as a preventative measure against appendicitis, and on the assumption that it doesn't have any useful function. Another example is embryology, which is the science which deals with the study of embryonic development from the moment of conception until it becomes a fully developed baby. At the end of the embryology course, our professor said that evolutionists consider that embryology provides a strong evidence in support of evolution since it shows how one cell at conception becomes a fully developed human being. Evolutionists often say that the embryo, during its development, repeats its ancestral history. All these and other references to evolution in the scientific community increased my doubt and the conflict inside me to a point where I decided that it is time to take a stand as to which to believe. Before making a final decision on this, I wanted to make one last effort to search answers to some critical questions, which included, number one, does the scientific evidence support the evolutionary theory? Number two, is there any scientific evidence that directly or indirectly points to the necessity of existence of a creator for this life? Number three, does science and scripture contradict each other? To the first question, scientific evidence seems to support the Darwinian claims. To the second question, there was no scientific evidence available at the time to support the existence of a creator for this life. To the third question, from answers to question 1 and 2, it appears that science and scripture contradict each other regarding the origin of life. At this point in my life, I had my last prayer in which I asked God to reveal Himself to me through science, to give me the scientific evidence that points to the necessity of His existence and that there must be a creator behind the existence of life. Otherwise, without this evidence, I cannot believe in His existence anymore. From this moment, in May of 1961, I adopted atheism as my way of life for the next 25 years. The second part of my spiritual journey is about how I found my way back to faith. Three elements contributed to this return. Number one, an increase in my scope of scientific knowledge. And number two, a better understanding and comprehension of the meaning behind this knowledge. And number three, the scientific evidence that I could not ignore in light of what I have acquired of knowledge and understanding. I acquired a fair amount of scientific knowledge when I became a faculty member in the School of Medicine in Alexandria University in Egypt. During my tenure, I obtained my master's degree and a PhD in the field of human histology. Human histology is the science that deals with the study of human body cells and tissues. So I had a fair knowledge about cellular biology, including chromosomal structure and its chemistry. Cells are very complex structures with many cellular processes, including building up and breaking down of materials, the transfer of material from and to the cytoplasm, and much more complicated chemical processes. All these processes are so precise and complex that scientists began to wonder what exactly controls and directs all these operations. The answer was found in the chromosomes of the nucleus that seemed to be the reservoir of immense instructional information that directs all cellular functions. There are 46 chromosomes in the human body. Each chromosome looks like a very long spiral thread made up chemically of a nucleic acid known as deoxyribonucleic acid, which is also known and abbreviated as DNA. While this was known, the mystery was how the instructional information, which directs all cellular functions in the entire body, is stored and how it operates. The answer was only known after the discovery of the complex molecular structure of the DNA, the attempts of which started late 19th century and early 20th century and came to a fruition in 1953, when James Watson and Francis Crick proposed the first model of such molecular structure, which was received very well in the scientific community. While the proposed model of the molecular structure of DNA proposed by James Watson and Francis Crick, was fairly close. It needed some more work to perfect it and fill in some gaps. They were joined by another scientist named Maurice Wilkins, and were able together to come up with the final version that was then adopted and recognized by the scientific community, and to which the three of them obtained the Nobel Prize in 1962. While the DNA structure is now common knowledge in biology courses in high school and college, it was not so in the early 60s. I learned it in detail in my master's in 1967. The famous molecular structure of DNA, as most of us studied in biology, is the double helix, which looks like a spiral staircase. When we unwind it, it looks like a ladder, with its posts made up of alternating phosphate and sugar molecules. The rungs of the ladder, which connect horizontally to the posts, are made up of pair-base molecules bonded in the middle. There are only 4 types of bases, namely adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine, abbreviated as A, T, G, and C, where A bonds only with a T and G bonds only with a C. This goes on through the entire length of the chromosomal DNA thread. While I have acquired that knowledge, the question remained as to how the instructional information that directs all cellular functions of the body is stored in the DNA molecule. I must say that I have not kept up with the knowledge about DNA since I was busy teaching undergrads and moving from one medical school to another in different countries. This takes me to the next phase in my life, where I acquired the understanding behind the knowledge. It started when I immigrated to the United States and met an old friend of mine who was at the time working on his master's degree in computer science. My friend used to talk to me about computers and how they will become the new technology which will drive every activity in life, from education to business to engineering, healthcare, etc. In early 1980s, around 1981-82, right before the advent of personal computers, which were introduced to the public in summer of 1982, people were concerned that computers will replace humans in the workplace. So I asked my friend if this concern is legitimate, and if these intelligent machines, which were also called the electronic minds in the Middle East, will they replace humans in the workplace? He said, of course not. Computers are machines that need humans to operate them. People just need to acquire the skills of how to operate these computers. More importantly, my friend continued, let's not call computers intelligent or electronic minds, because they neither have minds nor intelligence. The real intelligent mind behind the computer is the human mind that developed the operating system and the other software programs that run the computer to perform specific functions. Then I asked him, what exactly is a software program and how it runs the computer? He answered, a computer software program is basically a series of step-by-step instructions to the computer on how to process data of information. This is like when you buy an unassembled device and use the enclosed assembly instruction manual that comes with it, that guides you step by step on how to put it together. At the end of the process, you will have a functioning device ready for use. I then asked, and how the computer reads those instructions? Is there a language? He answered, yes, there are some computer programming languages, All of them address a digital code that the computer understands and executes. This code is a binary code made of zeros and ones. The sequence of those zeros and ones is what constitutes the digital code of the computer. I then asked it again, and what if there are errors in writing these programs? He answered, there will be errors in the execution of those commands, and hence errors in the final outcome. But in all cases, it is a human error, not a computer error. So I said, that means the program should be error-free as much as possible. He said, sure, but this is why the program has to be reviewed several times before it is released. At this point, I came to the conclusion that behind each effective and successful computer software program, there must be an intelligent mind, knowledge, purpose, plan and design, and extreme accuracy. I was so excited about my new knowledge and understanding of computer technology that I was among the first to buy a personal computer when it was released to the market in summer of 1982. I didn't realize that this computer knowledge and understanding will be my way of comprehending the scientific evidence that I will encounter 5 years later. In February of 1987, as I was reading a weekly magazine, a title of an article has drawn my attention. It read something like this: U.S. government approves funding for the Human Genome Project submitted by Dr. James Watson. Knowing what the human genome means and who is James Watson, I anxiously began to read the article. The writer began the article by explaining the scientific background of the project, saying that scientists found that the entire genome, which is the sum total of all genes in all the chromosomes, is very similar to a computer software program written in a chemical language of 4 alphabets, the A, T, G, and C, which are the 4 bases described earlier. This language of 4 letters, through their specific sequence, address a genetic code, which represents all instructional information driving all cellular processes of the entire body. This revealed the mystery of how genetic information is stored in the chromosomal DNA. Scientists also found that changes in the regular sequence of these letters could cause some genetic diseases. Such sequence changes could be caused by several factors, including chemical, physical, like radiation, and/or biological factors, like some viruses. The Genome Project, proposed by Dr. Watson, attempts to read and register the normal sequence of all the letters of the entire human genome. This would be the first step towards future research, attempting to identify any abnormality in the sequence of some segments of the genome and better understand how to deal with it. Dr. Watson also recommended to the Congress that if the project is approved, the information obtained should be accessible to all scientists of the world as a means to accelerate research in the healthcare field. At this point in the article, I began to contemplate the meaning behind the scientific finding that the genome, with its genetic code, represents a very sophisticated software program, which we could call the program of life. Immediately, it came to my mind the conclusion I reached 5 years earlier concerning computer programs, which says that behind each effective and successful computer program, there must be an intelligent mind, a great deal of knowledge, a purpose, a plan and design, and extreme accuracy. As I continued my reading of the article, I came across an interaction between the government official who announced the news in a news conference and one of the attending reporters. To the best of my recollection, the reporter asked the official, "What was the verdict regarding Dr. Watson's recommendation to provide an open access to the information once the project is completed?" The official responded by saying, "All the data obtained will be the property of the US government. However, we are open to entertain any request by the international community to access this database." The reporter responded, "How could this be the property of the US government and the project name itself is called the human genome, which should be a property of the entire human race?" The government official responded back by saying, "It is the property of the US government because the government will be the one providing the funds and technology necessary to get this project going. It is a big investment that gives the US government the copyright on the outcome." The reporter responded back saying, "In legal terms, the copyright is the right of the author of the genetic code, not the reader of the code." The official responded by asking the reporter, "And who is the author?" This was the same question I had in my mind. The reporter answered, "To my belief, the author is God." This obvious conclusion hit me right between the eyes, and I cried, "Oh my God, I was so blind and ignorant." With this revelation, through this indisputable scientific evidence, I began to reassess my initial position that was based on answers to 3 original questions, which took me away from faith. First question: is there any scientific evidence that directly or indirectly points to the necessity of existence of a creator for this life? The answer is yes. There is the biological evidence of the DNA and the cosmological evidence of the Big Bang Theory, which is gaining more ground as the scientific model that explains the origin of the universe. According to the Big Bang Theory, the universe is not eternal, but has a beginning, some 14 billion years ago. This means that there must be a cause behind the existence of the universe, a cause that transcends time, space, and matter. In conclusion, number 1, there is a creator behind the existence of the universe and everything therein. Number 2, the creator transcends the universe and is beyond time, space, and matter, which means the cause is immaterial, spaceless, and timeless. All these are attributes describing the God of the Bible. Number 3, while the above evidence was not available at the time I asked for it, it became available few years later. From this I learned that the absence of evidence to the existence of a creator is not in itself evidence against his existence. The second question is, does scientific evidence support the theory of evolution? In order to answer this question, we must look at it in light of the cosmological evidence, which impacts on the main premise of the Darwinian evolution. The Big Bang Theory provides evidence that the universe has a beginning and is not eternal. Therefore, the time dimension is so limited to allow life to start spontaneously, as depicted in Darwin's theory, since this life-originating accident requires much longer time to have a chance of happening. For the same reason, This limited time factor undermines macroevolution along the species line. However, scientific evidence supports microevolution. Microevolution is a mechanism that allows living organisms to adapt to their environment. So the short answer to this question is that there is no solid evidence in support of the origin of life or macroevolution as described in the Darwinian theory of evolution. However, there is more scientific evidence in support of microevolution. In conclusion, the Darwinian evolution could not adequately explain the origin of life within the scope of the available scientific evidence. Microevolution is an adaptive survival mechanism that allows living organisms to adapt to their environment. My personal belief is that this microevolution is a means to sustain life and is encoded in the DNA by the Creator. For God is not only the creator of life, but also the sustainer of life. The third question was, does science and scripture contradict each other? Answer, not really. The reason of the apparent contradiction results from the fact that science does not have all the pieces or facts. At this point, the scientists have to develop hypotheses based on the available limited pieces of information. It is at this time when some contradiction with the scripture may arise. However, as more evidence and information become available, the bigger picture will become apparent and the contradiction with the scripture no longer exists. In conclusion, science lags behind scripture. It needs time to catch up with the truth of the scripture. My final conclusion, after considering all the questions, turned me around 180 degrees towards faith, and I began looking for further scientific evidence to confirm this conclusion, and I did find several. However, no matter how much evidence there is to point clearly to the existence of God, there will always be skeptical people who choose not to believe for their own personal reasons. Evidence is only useful for those who are really seeking truth, and nothing but the truth.